Welcome back to DBL. Hidden in this small town of Florence, Colorado, is a place so secluded and secure, it is considered the Alcatraz of the Rockies. ADX Florence is the highest security prison in the world, housing the most dangerous criminals. So we have a look at the Supermax in this special edition of DBL's True Crime Chronicles.
Lingering in the shadows of Colorado's Rocky Mountains lies the country's only federal Supermax prison. ADX Florence is closed off to the rest of the world. On the outside, armed security guards, gun towers, and cameras. On the inside, pure isolation. Inmates spend an average of 23 hours a day in a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell with a bed, desk, toilet, sink, and shower. Meals are slid through a small hole in the door. The only glimpse of the outside world is a tiny window. This prison was specifically designed to keep every inmate in solitary confinement. No one has escaped since it opened in 1994. The Supermax incarcerates criminals deemed too dangerous for the average prison, like the notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was transferred in July after escaping 2 prisons in Mexico. Boston Marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, and Oklahoma City bomber Terry Nichols are also incarcerated here. Of the 400 inmates, 1 was considered the most dangerous: Terrible Tommy Silverstein. He killed 3 inmates and a prison guard in jail before being transferred to the Supermax. Tommy spent more than 3 decades in solitary confinement before dying this year. The few who have been inside and made it out call the Supermax life after death. Others say it's a clean version of hell.
Wow. We are joined now by Alan Prendergast, a senior reporter at Westward Magazine in Denver. Thank you for joining us. I can't imagine even stepping foot in that facility. Now, you've spent the past 30 years writing on high security prisons and historic crimes, and you were also one of the last reporters allowed at this Supermax prison. So everyone wants to know, what was it like inside? What's a typical day like? Please tell us.
It's a very disorienting experience. You go through a maze of locks, doors, sally ports, surveillance. The staff are in these control rooms with these panels of lights, sort of like the Starship Enterprise. Wow. And they're controlling remotely what's going on and intensely monitoring what is happening with the inmates, who are mostly just in their cells.
They never interact, ever. Would
Very
Ted
rarely.
Kaczynski interact with El Chapo ever?
The only way that would probably happen is during a recreation period, if they were both in different cages on the yard.
Near each other.
But most of the real high-profile ones tend to be even more isolated. Wow. So that they may not be allowed on the yard. Someone like Silverstein wouldn't have been allowed on the yard with other inmates. He would have been alone doing that. So,
chilling.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, you've written a lot about isolation cells, and I actually read an article that said that because they've been in there for 23 hours a day, they start to see things. And you've, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You said that it's almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? Torture. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this would kind of violate our United States anti-torture laws because of like what they're being subjected to, even though there are despicable people?
Right. Well, there is a serious issue there. International rights organizations do consider that degree of isolation to be torture. I mean, it is debilitating. We have studies that show people that are isolated like that, they become very sensitive to noise and light. They sometimes become paranoid. They do hallucinate sometimes. If they already have some mental illness, and a lot of inmates do, it can be exacerbated by that. There are instances of suicide, mutilation, things like that. And yes, it's a problem because on one hand, we do want to keep these people isolated because they are extremely dangerous, some of them. But at what point does that become not a good thing? I mean, at state level, a lot of prisons are rethinking solitary because if these people are going to get out someday, they've been very damaged by this. And some people in ADX, the Supermax, do get released at some point down the line. So you have to think about that in terms of public safety as well as whether you're being humane.
We just learned about terrible Tommy Silverstein, which a lot of people might not know about, and you wrote back and forth with him. You never interviewed him in person. Did he ever have any regrets at the end of his life? He just passed away this past year, I believe.
Yeah, he did. He was actually a very interesting guy. I mean, he's one of the reasons ADX was built, because these murders took place at another high-security prison, but the security wasn't adequate enough to keep him further isolated. He particularly regretted he murdered a correctional officer at that prison, and over the years, he did really have, I think, a change of heart about some of the things that he did when he was an Aryan Brotherhood leader and thought was following the convict code about these things. But yes, he was
back and forth with him.
Oh yes, no, we corresponded for years. He was a very thoughtful guy. I mean, he had done a lot of thinking and a lot of contemplation over the years. He was probably the most isolated prisoner in America for much of his career. And if you want to talk about torture, he was certainly in position to do that, but he didn't seem to lose his marbles when he was in there.
Unbelievable.
I just have a quick thing,
please.
Because we interview some of these people and kind of give them a voice, I'd rather give someone like that a voice to say, I was president of the Aryan Brotherhood. It's not worth going down this path. I have regrets. My life's almost coming to an end. I'd rather have those type of things get out there than, why did you do this? And let me get into your mind a little bit more and almost push them up.
You want people to learn from
I'd rather you get those letters that he wrote to you at the end of his life out there.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, there are all kinds of people in these places, and some of them are, by any social standards, really bad people. But I think you can learn a lot from people who have been through some of these experiences. Sometimes they've had an opportunity to look at a side of life that most of us just don't experience.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, Alan, for being here. You can read Alan's reporting on high-profile crimes and prisons at westword.com.